Whispering Chicken presents. This is Friday's edition of Clumsy Hippo's morning cereal. Please stay tuned after the story for an original theme song. Burners by Sheridan D. Lowe. So here they were on the eve of their wedding. Standing across the room from and facing her fiancé, Mercury Blank wondered if there had actually been any signs along the way to indicate that this would all have a terrifying end. Although, standing here now in a moment which was existing far longer than possible, not even any blinks, but if pressed to remember properly, Mercury supposed she would have to admit to instances which may be construed as flags, whichever color one might ascribe to them. Upon reflection, Mercury understood things were strange beginning when they met. It was as if she had been born to strip, with glitter and lube in her blood. Then Mercury realized how good all the girls had been. Nestled into the nooks and crannies of the city, Mercury doubted her ability to ever find the Nine Damsels Club again. The girls were all paid a salary because days, even weeks, would pass before another man entered. Still, they did dance, for they had been paid to do so. It was funny how the beginning of your life can be moved. Mercury bent over and began to polish the pole with the crack of her ass while she shook her tasseled breasts at the empty chair in front of her. Lady Gaga was singing Perfect Illusion, and Mercury remembered thinking it was a good thing she liked it since they played it so often, which was when the door opened and Mercury's beginning was moved. Standing upright, the dancer continued to watch the man as her hand gained a firm grasp on the pole, her body tilting out at an angle when she extended her arm, and with a series of small steps began to orbit the pole. Out of nowhere, someone, owner of Nine Damsels, appeared in front of the patron. In a black suit with white hair and a Fu Manchu, her employer was like as if Charlie Chan's grandfather came to help solve a case, maybe from heaven. Having spent far too much time sizing up someone Mercury knew already, her eyes returned to the new man. Tall and gaunt, he looked as if he needed a meal to tide him over while someone made him a base meal. His eyes darted around at nothing. His clothes were a disaster. Under the black hoodie, dried blood could be clearly seen on the front of his t-shirt. The jeans were new, but unfortunately his shoes did not match in style, brand, or size. His right pinky finger and half of his left thumb were gone. Long gone. Barely dancing now, Mercury wondered if the man's toupee was functional or a disguise. Based on Sum's height, Mercury guessed that the man was around 5'11", 250-ish, 5 o'clock shadow, silver flake shadow, and a tooth which had just popped out. Mercury was smitten. In a panic, the man suddenly started searching his pockets until he found an envelope and only then relaxed. Handing the item to someone, he got in return a can of Pepsi. This was not uncommon. Mercury's boss used those fake hands with a bottom that can be unscrewed. Quite a bit of drugs, payoffs, fencing, and more went on, and undoubtedly more than actual customers. Mercury only noticed she was standing still when she noticed that the two men were looking in her direction. Her boss called her over, and Mercury was introduced to Junk Shasta, obviously some kind of nickname. The stripper blushed and looked into his eyes, that were not speaking to each other, and covered by an awning of wiry gray hair, all in one line. When he had been able to, this man had been in many fights. A powerful aura was brought to her by the people at Brute. Junk's watch began to beep, so he retrieved a bottle of pills out of his pocket with hands that began to shake as his head turned back and forth, like he had heard something. Mr. Won cleared his throat, and when Mercury looked at her boss, the man nodded in Junk's direction. "Oh," Mercury cried, darting forward. "Let me take care of the medicine for you, Mr. Shasta. That way you look around all you want." Junk looked at the woman as if for the first time, then recognition set in. "Yes, that is very helpful, thank you. Please, I'd like you to call me Junk." Mercury was beaming as she went and quickly returned with a drink so that he could take his medicine. When he had, he commented that he had arranged it with Mr. Won for Mercury to be an assistant to himself, who had various tasks needing taken off of his hands. Clearing his throat, Junk Shasta added the possibility of a nice dinner. It was then Mercury felt Mr. Woon covering her nakedness with a trench coat and handing over an unfamiliar suitcase. For a moment it looked as if Mercury were collapsing, and Junk alone started to reach out to the woman, but suddenly the young woman regained herself. "Whew," Mercury said. "That was odd. Like every muscle in my body took a brief nap." Turning to Junk, who had his arm held out, she smiled as she accepted it and walked with him towards the door. Lady Gaga's voice was cut off suddenly, echoing on. Junk was getting out sunglasses, so Mercury turned and looked around the empty club. Frowning as if confused, she studied the poles, unaware that for some reason her beginning had been moved once again. The sound of someone telling Junk not to forget the burners brought the former stripper back towards the future. Junk insisted they walk hand in hand. Mercury had no objections. Exiting an alley, the pair walked behind buildings which were shielding Mercury and Junk from whatever was creating the cacophony of mismatched sounds grating up against each other. Retaining a natural smile, the woman wondered if the two of them would ever escape the smell of urine, obviously from multiple species. They did, and Mercury took a deep breath while wondering when the last time was that she had been outside. Junk had been explaining himself to her, but while listening, Mercury decided she would think about him later. There was something interesting about the street they were on. While elsewhere the harsh light of day was exposing the flaws in other buildings' facades, shade from a tower somewhere dialed down the brightness on everything here, giving these buildings, cars, and trees a variety of gray shades. In a subtle watercolory way, the colors of things could subtly be made out, especially when squinting. Without waiting for Junk to pause his biography, Mercury remarked, "It's like the street out of the 40s moved into town." Junk's mouth was open, but he looked anyway and straightened, squinted, shook his head and turned back to his companion. "Mercury, are you even listening to what I'm telling you?" Smiling, she turned and answered, "Every word, sweetie, I swear. I'll sort it out later, I promise." Turning back, Mercury pondered aloud. "I don't know what style buildings these are, but they have those little underground apartments like Laverne and Shirley, or that scary Audrey Hepburn movie." Nodding his head, Junk sprouted a grin and said, "Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of borrowing one of these. Look here, Mercury." Her shoulders stiffened. Now I wish I hadn't brought up that Hepburn movie. For the first time, Junk laughed with her. "Look," he restarted, "your name is going to have to change." Mercury shrugged. "Fine by me. Blank is so... Oh, man, what is the word?" No, Junk interrupted. "Mercury." Enlightenment was swift for the woman, who nodded while acquiescing. "Understood. No standing out. Did you have a name in mind?" Blushing, the man looked at the street and admitted, "I like the idea of naming you after my Meemaw. She died when I was 8. "Oh, my God, that is so sweet," Mercury sincerely told Junk while watching a gray-haired woman who watched them from a first-floor window in the second building facing the pair of newcomers. "What was her name?" she asked. Junk huffed and looked at Mercury as if he had once again caught her not listening. "Meemaw, I just told you." After brief consideration, Mercury said, "It's lovely, and I think we're beginning to draw attention." "You're right, Meemaw," Junk told her. "Let's get out of here." "Wait," Meemaw ordered. "What was that about not forgetting burners all about?" Joyously, Junk grabbed her hands and kissed them with lips that felt like burlap. "Just in the nick of time, dear Meemaw." They backtracked down the alley and found a dumpster. Meemaw helped Junk flip the lid back, and the man, one at a time, threw 3 pre-smashed cell phones inside. "These are burner phones. My new ones are inside the apartment," Junk explained. For the first few weeks, Meemaw spent much of her time alone. During the day, she would go out and conduct business, trade messages, meet with a seedy lawyer, now and then as a delivery service. It was decided, since frequent and random comings and goings would draw attention, she would come and go around the same time each day, with the aim of appearing scheduled. With such a large window of time free, Meemaw would drop by bars and clubs where she might pick up on what the hubbub was. And a busy police station could be rife with developments or overheard theories. Casually she strolled, as if restless, and picked up on conversations or thumbed through an unguarded file. One of the last days she was spending alone, Meemaw browsed the display of wanted flyers in the station, easily settling on the face of her Junk. He was in the passenger seat of a car, and Meemaw had to move a a different notice to see the rest of the picture. Driving the car was Mima herself. Confused, she leaned in, squinted, and quickly replaced the other flyer. Glancing around, suddenly nervous, Mima spotted a woman on her phone. At her feet was a small boy, and tossed casually onto the floor behind him was what she supposed to be the child's phone. Just 2 steps, and she was bending to pick the phone up, then a smooth transition into walking past the mother and child. The phone was held to her ear while fabricating a conversation in which she was a loud talker. "You're kidding. What hospital?" "Oh my God, that's across town. I am not being belligerent. Are you still mad about the potato salad?" "Well, if it was good enough for the Queen, it sure as shit better be good enough for you." Through the exit door, Mima tossed the phone into the trash can just outside. Taking another from her pocket, she ordered an Uber, continued to walk and think about how she had no recollection of ever driving Junk anywhere. After Junk's 25th consecutive day without leaving the apartment, he went out. Naturally, Mima went with him. In public, Junk paid extra special attention to his date, an amount the woman thought was equal to how little he did when they were alone. Of course, he was constantly on the phone, or phones, poring over papers or documents Mima had brought home. Now that she wasn't going out every day, it seemed they were going to be able to enjoy some downtime, maybe their first real date. Mima, the former stripper, was sitting on the edge of the bed fastening the strap of her platform shoes. She was glad to have them. Someone apparently had no clue what to pack for clothing, seeing as how half of what he handed her were not even Mima's clothes. It was either these or a pair of someone's neon orange Keds. Standing, the woman adjusted her hairnet skirt she was wearing. This is what she and her friends, that she barely remembered, called a skirt so short you needed a hairnet with it. Glancing at the bed, Mima wondered again if Junk had been sleeping only while she was out. In the micro kitchen, Junk held a phone as far away from his eyes as his hand would go, then brought it back quickly to his face to touch the screen once. Extending his arm again, he repeated the process. At first, Mima thought he was wearing a tuxedo, but it turned out to be a lighter-colored suit someone had covered with black Sharpie. A vintage, thin, golden silk bow tie had been expertly tied around the older man's neck. Glancing up at the woman he was now dating, Junk looked worried, rocking back and forth on alternating feet. Mima was crestfallen. Not a word had been said, but she had a knack for faces. Almost no time passed before the man's eyebrows were raised, and he was shuffling a pair of black SAS shoes towards the closet. "This is supposed to be for Christmas," Junk said as he opened the door and rummaged around in the collection of wigs, male and female, until he was able to retrieve a large wrapped box with a bow. Squealing with glee, Mima stopped short as she reached for the present. It was wrapped like on soap operas to save time, the top wrapped separately. Not as fun, but it made no difference once the box was open. "Shut your crap hole," Mima cried while lifting the floor-length sable coat from the box. "This is for me?" Junk was scratching the part of the jacket under his arm as he told his girlfriend, "Naturally, it seems fortuitous to have it this early." His scratching hand rubbed underneath his nose, and he was left looking like an elderly Charlie Chaplin who dyed his mustache. Thus began the glory days of Junk and his squeeze, Mima. All 5 of them. If there was an illegal gaming parlor or a dimly lit diner, they were there. Backroom meetings or forgers in secret rooms, yep, they were there. Mima was familiar with these goings-on. She just wasn't sure how. Her beginning kept moving forward, and she couldn't remember what she was doing when she met Junk. Her mind was beginning to think differently, less tethered to the influence. Mima wasn't quite sure anymore if Junk Shasta's feelings were real. Junk was a nice man, though, despite a violent past. He'd come home after their first date with dresses of various styles and sizes. As he ran towards the bathroom, he called out for Mima to pick up the best and set it aside. The last of the glory days was when Junk asked her to wear the dress. Mima was more pleased that they weren't going somewhere she was more than likely to get splinters somehow. Driving out to an island, the taxi dropped them off at a large colonial. This was the home of Junk's employer, who would be providing his loyal employee on the lam with documents and directions to start anew. Mima was simply glowing as they departed. Earlier, she had confronted Junk about his lack of enthusiasm over their relationship, going so far as to suggest he didn't want her for a girlfriend. In response, Junk had sighed and retrieved an engagement ring from his pocket. Junk was embarrassed when they discovered that besides Mima, only men were in attendance. The woman began to apologize, except the host wasn't having it. "You're too kind, Mr. Colombo," Mima told him. No, he answered. "None of that, Mr. Colombo. Beautiful lady." The man, graying at the temples, kissed Mima's hand gently. "You call me by my first name, Columbus." Then began the apologies. "My wife Sophia sends her apologies. It's bowling night. You forgive." A young man in shirt sleeves stepped forward. "I'm Lombardo, Colombo," at which Columbus kissed his own knuckle. "My wife Gina, with a G, sends her apologies. Tonight is sandwich night at the PTA. You forgive." Another said, "My girlfriend Sinead," at which everyone groaned and shook their heads, "sends her regrets. She broke her leg yesterday, when I was out of town." Everyone nodded and harumphed in agreement. "You forgive." By the time it was over, Mima had no idea who anyone's name was. One by one, the men kissed her hand as they adjourned to the study. Only Junk resisted, passing through as the wooden doors slid together. She'd been told to make herself at home, so she decided to do precisely that. There was an element she was missing. She just knew it. Walking through the moonlit parlor, eyes centered on a slightly open drawer in the credenza. Slowly the drawer slid her way, and she frowned. The drawer was full of phones. Two of the other 4 drawers in the room were also packed with phones. The other 2 were chock full of assorted handguns. Out of place, a walnut apothecary table stood, missing most of the drawers. Casually, Mima took a few peeks when a spotlight swept past and startled her. The lights were making her try to remember something, somewhere. Then the helicopter moved on, and so did Mima, into the private office of Columbus Colombo. The room was clean, and Mima would be surprised if anything were ever left out when not in use, except on the desk. A few large manila envelopes sat in a loose stack. The top one had a single name scrawled on the front, Shasta. Leaning over to take the item, Mima saw a couple of smashed phones in the trash can and one squished back into the seat of the chair next to the small handgun. Inside the envelope was just what was expected. Identification, passport, tickets, lease, cash. Typical getaway starter pack. Something wasn't right, though. Checking the empty envelope again, Mima went over what she had found. Head spinning, the woman helped herself to Mr. Colombo's chair. Sorting information and trying to find order, Mima also felt her past shrinking when the doors of the study opened. Mima jumped, then hurriedly finished replacing the documents and showing up in the parlor just before the first of the men. As cigars were being lit, Alfredo Colombo presented Mima with a glass of wine and a wink. His wife, Isabella, was at a Tupperware party trying to keep Giovanna Polci from there for her husband, Giovanni, until at least 9 o'clock. Mima forgave. Sipping a delicious wine, Mima saw into the office where Columbus gave the envelope to Junk. As swiftly as would appear natural, Mima was across the room hovering by the open door. "Now this is everything I can do to help," Columbus said. "You'll be safe and comfortable, but from this day forward you can never return here. This kind of heat is dangerous." Mima heard Junk murmur something, then Columbus told him, "You have disappointed me for the last time. Leave here tonight, and it will not bode well for you if you return. You are dead to me. I no longer have a father." Mima spat the wine out of her mouth. As the heads of the men turned in her direction, she sidestepped around the furniture while wiping her mouth with the just-in-case panties she always carried. "Pardon me," she started. "I think I heard the phone. Cab." Throwing the door open, Mima cried out Junk's name. Then, to the astonished expression of the men, she said, "You forgive." Then the men craned their necks and watched her run down the driveway, then alternate which direction she was going. The day before the wedding, Mima woke up with a hangover. They had gone to the worst bar around, Gravy's 2, in the bowling alley, home of the 250-proof Jello shot. Moaning aloud, Mima sat upright in the bed. With blurry vision, she saw Junk peek in from the bathroom. Then the water in there was turned on and soon off again. Hearing 2 plops, The woman rubbed her eyes so she was able to see Junk bring the glass of bubbling hangover relief. He moved over by the dresser while Mima drank the fruity, powdery water. Thanking her fiancé, she stood and he took Mima's glass, proceeding to the kitchen. Squinting, she brought into focus the Pepsi can resting on the dresser. She was sure it was familiar somehow, important even. Junk returned and meekly asked her if she knew what day it was. Scratching the side of her head and yawning, Mima just said, For some reason, she was having a hard time maneuvering through any memories at present. This is the day I depart, Junk answered himself. You? Tomorrow's a wedding? Mima asked as her present memories revealed themselves, yet she pretended to be surprised. Then the time seemed to freeze, standing across the room from Junk, the day before their wedding, beginning to put the whole thing together. Yes, I'm sorry, but this is where you and I part ways. There was a pause, and Junk moved closer to the woman, even studying her. Mima? Mima experienced a flood of forgotten experiences as her beginning was moved back to where it belonged. Her childhood, the strip club, the girls, Sum, the monkey. No, 2 monkeys. Blinking, the woman looked at Junk and said, Don't you mean Mercury? The man stiffened, but tried his best to relax again. Yes, I was told about your clarity in the end. The end? Mercury asked Junk. She was there as a sort of beard, to provide the client with another when needed, whatever the reason. It was in the Alka-Seltzer, wasn't it? She asked. Mercury, I'm really sorry. This is the way it is. Junk was choking on his own words. You're just a burner. Now I don't need you anymore. And I'm full of too much information, Mima retorted. Too much to live. A burner is a burner, was Junk's reply. You probably have a few minutes if you wanted to say anything. Mercury turned to face the man, not her boyfriend. Retaining eye contact, she said nothing. She thought, mainly about that night at the Columbos. When she understood that she was not going with Junk, Mima had done a little rearranging. It was dumb luck that Junk hadn't looked closely at the contents of the envelope yet. 3 manila envelopes were on that desk that night, each bearing a last name. Dividing the packs in 3, they were rotated so that the new lease and auto paperwork were under one name, the travel tickets were under another, and identification was a third. Junk was going to have a hard time getting anywhere, especially when the cash was presently in Mercury's pockets. Neither broke their gaze as Mercury began to feel warm. The silly old man had a tear in his eye, but Mercury found one of her own. With a whoomp, Mercury imploded, then rapidly exploded as an ashen cloud. A robust woman in a white t-shirt and jeans approached the door, then stopped because she heard no sounds from inside. Taking a chance, her hand grabbed the handle and the door opened as the electric guitar began the song Perfect Illusion by Lady Gaga. Some woman quickly appeared. Ah, welcome, Ms. Bono. Right on time. There are 9 burners to choose from. The owner watched the customer's face, studied the girls. That is Venus. She would come proficient in weaponry. With the sound of platform shoes approaching from behind the curtain, the 9th girl emerged and took up her pole. Sum glanced at Ms. Bono and said, I see our most popular burner has caught your eye. The best eye candy and clever. Nodding her head, Ms. Bono said, Yes, her. Someone turned towards the dancers and called out, Mercury, can you come over here, please? And then to the customer he said, I left her surname blank so that you can choose whatever you prefer. When Mercury arrived, someone introduced her to Ms. Bono. Please, the newer woman requested, call me Sonny, then held a hand out. Mercury shook the hand and almost fell to the floor, only just regaining herself in time. Whew, that was odd, she said. It's like every muscle in my body took a brief nap. Smiling at Sonny, Mercury accepted the coat and luggage from Sum before she left with her new girlfriend. The end. is what I am. I'm unaware of any end. You're everywhere. My absent friend. I see you there. But you're pretend. Then the mouth that once told me you love me said I would finish up like this relationship dead. To him I was no more than his last poem. Only a burner to me, rarely said with the tongue. Nice to meet you, my love. Now you've drained all my blood. I'm not used to your journey ahead. Useless burners are better off dead. You triggered me. It's how I loved to stop my flee. Lay on the love. It's always you, no matter who. No chance for me. Epiphany. And you look at me once more in the eyes. And I like this song. Abruptly